At the wedding, the MC asked my fiancé if he was willing to marry me. He picked up the microphone, looked at my best friend in the audience, and said, "I love her." The entire venue erupted in an uproar. I calmly took off the diamond ring and walked up to his father. Smiling, I said, "Uncle, our family collaboration is terminated. The 60 million debt, no problem with it being settled tomorrow, right?" His father's face instantly turned pale. The final note of the wedding march faded into the dazzling glow of the crystal chandeliers, while the air still lingered with the cloying scent of champagne and roses. The MC's upbeat voice echoed throughout the banquet hall via the microphone. "So, Mr. Victor, do you take this beautiful and intelligent Ms. Elaine to be your wife, to have and to hold?" Victor interrupted him. He took the microphone from the MC, his fingertips turning slightly white from the force of his grip. Every eye in the room was fixed on him, awaiting those 3 words, "I do." I stood there in my Vera Wang couture wedding dress, my face serene beneath the veil, ready to complete the 6-month-long arranged corporate marriage. Love? Perhaps it had existed once, but it had long since been eroded by the daily grind of business calculations and vested interests. Today, I was simply fulfilling my duty as the heir to Empire Capital Group. Victor took a deep breath but didn't look at me. His gaze swept past me to the front row where my maid of honor was seated. Vivian, dressed in a pink bridesmaid dress, nervously clutched the fabric of her skirt, her eyes brimming with tears as she looked back at him. At that moment, my heart felt as if an invisible hand had given it a gentle squeeze, not a sharp pain, but the numbing confirmation of a premonition coming true. "I object." Victor's voice came through the speakers, clear and resolute, like a stone tossed into a still lake, instantly rippling outward in waves. The murmurs of the guests swelled like a tide, while camera flashes erupted wildly, desperate to capture any trace of devastation on my face. "The woman I love is Vivian," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction, as if delivering a hero's proclamation. His blazing eyes locked onto the woman I had called my best friend. Vivian's tears finally overflowed. She covered her mouth, her shoulders trembling violently, appearing utterly shocked and moved by this sudden confession. What a perfect performance of Love Conquers All. I thought I would be furious, would cry, would rush at them like a madwoman and slap them both. But I didn't. All I felt was, a little cold. That chill spread from my heart, freezing my blood and numbing all expression on my face. I raised my hand and, with deliberate yet eerily steady movements, removed the extravagant pigeon-egg diamond ring from my left ring finger. The diamond's facets reflected a merciless light that stung my eyes. I didn't look at Victor's stupid face, which was a mix of guilt and determination, nor did I pay attention to Vivian's sobbing. Holding up the intricate hem of my dress, I stepped down from the flower-adorned stage, one slow step at a time. The sound of my high heels clicking against the polished marble floor was sharp and clear, each step as if pressing down on the hearts of Victor's family. I walked straight to the main table, toward Victor's father, Howard, chairman of Genesis Holdings. He had already stood up, his usually well-maintained face now filled with panic and awkwardness, as he tried to say something to salvage the situation. I walked up to him and stood still. Then, I smiled. It wasn't a forced grin, nor a bitter sneer, but a calm, even somewhat polite smile. "Uncle," I began, my voice not loud but cutting through the clamor of the crowd like a precise surgical knife, "since Victor and Vivian are true love, I, the obstacle, should gracefully step aside." The muscles on Howard's face twitched as he forced out a smile uglier than a grimace. "Elaine, don't be like this." "Victor, he just had a moment of confusion." "I'll make him." I raised my hand, cutting him off. "Since the wedding is cancelled, all business collaborations between our families naturally come to an end." I gently placed the diamond ring on the plate in front of him, making a crisp ding sound. "So, regarding the 60 million we, Empire Capital Group, invested to support Genesis Holdings cash flow back then, please return it to us by tomorrow, all right? Transferring it by tomorrow shouldn't be a problem, right?" Howard's face instantly turned from red to pale, then ashen gray. 60 million. That number exploded like a thunderbolt among the wedding guests. If the earlier broken engagement was merely a scandalous affair, now this farce instantly escalated into a full-blown financial reckoning. Victor finally woke from his charging for love hero fantasy. He rushed off the stage, grabbed my wrist, and roared, "Elaine! Do you have to be so materialistic? Is our relationship only worth 60 million to you?" His grip was tight, making my wrist ache. I frowned, shook off his hand, and fixed him with a cold, emotionless stare. Vivian rushed over as well, tears streaming down her face. Clinging to Victor's arm, she looked at me with pitiful eyes and said, "Elaine, don't blame Victor, this is all my fault. I shouldn't have shown up, I shouldn't have come between you two. Don't argue over me, Elaine." It's all my fault, but I'm so innocent. Green tea performance made my stomach churn. I couldn't be bothered to look at her, keeping my eyes fixed on Victor as I corrected him word by word. "You're mistaken. First, our relationship is worthless. So don't use it to measure anything, it doesn't deserve that. Second, these 60 million aren't my money. They belong to Empire Capital Group, to the shareholders, funds my father trusted yours with as working capital. Now that trust has been broken, not a single cent of this money can be missing." My voice wasn't loud, but every word was clear, brimming with strength. The VIPs seated in the front row were all prominent figures in the business world, and they immediately grasped the message. The tone of the murmurs instantly shifted. So the Victors owed the Elaine 60 million? From the sound of it, this money was the Elaine's life-saving funds? Damn, taking someone's money and then humiliating them at the wedding? Has this young Master Victor lost his mind? Howard's forehead was beaded with cold sweat as he looked around at the pointing fingers and nearly lost his balance. His tone had completely softened, tinged with pleading. "Elaine, look, there are so many people here today, spare our family some dignity. As for the money, let's talk in a couple of days, I promise we." Before 5 p.m. tomorrow, I cut him off coldly, delivering my ultimatum. "Otherwise, the legal notice will arrive at your company right on time." Just as Howard turned deathly pale and seemed about to faint on the spot, the heavy carved doors of the banquet hall were suddenly flung open from outside. "Who dares bully my daughter?" A steady, resonant voice rang out. I turned around and saw my father, Harrison, striding in with two solemn-looking lawyers dressed in black suits. He was over 50, yet his posture remained upright, his gaze sharp, and the commanding presence he had cultivated from years in high positions instantly dominated the room. The guests unconsciously fell silent, clearing a path for him. Father walked up to me, took off his suit jacket, and draped it over my shoulders, which were exposed from my strapless wedding dress. The jacket still carried the familiar scent of cedar and the warmth unique to a father. He patted my shoulder, a gesture full of reassurance and strength. Then, he turned to Howard, who was almost collapsing, his voice as cold and hard as iron. "Howard, my daughter's words are mine as well. Tomorrow at 5 p.m., the money, or we'll see you in court. The choice is yours." With that, he wrapped an arm around my shoulders, not even glancing at Victor and his son or the still sobbing Vivian, and led me toward the door. "Let's go home." Behind us, there was a deathly silence, punctuated only by Howard's heavy, desperate gasps. I know this scene has only just begun. Returning to my own villa, the air lacked any celebratory atmosphere, only a suffocating silence. The servants moved about cautiously, even walking on tiptoe, afraid to make the slightest sound. I strode directly to the second-floor dressing room, shut the door, and cut myself off from the outside world. In the mirror, I wore that exorbitantly expensive wedding dress, my makeup flawless, looking like the perfect bride. Yet I knew, something had shattered. I reached up, tore off my veil, and threw it to the ground. Next came the necklace around my neck, the earrings dangling from my ears. Finally, without a word, I turned and unzipped the dress down my back. The intricate lace and costly silk slid off my body, pooling at my feet like a shattered cloud. I took the simplest set of black casual clothes from the wardrobe and changed into them. Throughout the entire process, my hands did not tremble. As I walked out of the dressing room, my father was standing at the doorway, holding a cup of hot milk. He asked nothing, simply handing me the cup. Drink something warm to soothe yourself. I took it, the warmth transferring from my fingertips, driving away the chill in my heart. In the living room, my father retrieved a document from his study and placed it on the coffee table in front of me. Take a look. I opened the manila folder. Inside was the latest financial status analysis report for Genesis Holdings. As I flipped through page after page, my gaze grew colder. Burdened with heavy debts and on the verge of a cash flow collapse, with several key projects stalled, it's practically an empty shell now. And our family's $60 million injection was like a shot of adrenaline for a dying man, barely keeping them afloat until today, my wedding. My father sighed, his voice tinged with lingering fear and relief. I warned you long ago that Victor is unstable in character, ambitious but weak in execution, not someone who can achieve great things. The ship of Genesis Holdings has already been riddled with holes and could sink at any moment. When I signed that contract for the $60 million, I made sure there was a fallback. It's structured as readily withdrawable working capital, just in case of a day like this. It turned out my father had seen through everything long ago and had already paved a way out for me. As I looked at the staggering deficits on the report, recalling Victor's foolish look of sacrificing everything for love at the wedding, I could only feel the irony. I thought he was just incompetent, but it turns out he's brainless, I remarked coldly. For the sake of a Vivian, he personally lit the fuse of his own family's powder keg. This level of stupidity even surpassed his betrayal, making me feel that hatred was unnecessary. At this very moment, in Victor's villa, the real storm had only just begun. Slap, a crisp sound of a slap echoed throughout the opulent living room. Howard, trembling with rage, pointed at Victor's nose, his eyes bloodshot. $60 million. Where the hell do you expect me to get $60 million for you by tomorrow? Do you have any idea the company will go bankrupt tomorrow? Our whole family will be left to starve. Victor covered his stinging cheek, staring in disbelief at his father, who had never laid a hand on him his entire life. His young master temper flared up, and he defiantly shouted back, "Dad! Are you really willing to sacrifice my lifelong happiness for money? I told you, Vivian is my true love. Elaine and I have no feelings for each other, it's just an arranged marriage." A transaction. A transaction? Howard laughed in anger. What do you even know about transactions? The food you eat, the clothes you wear, the car you drive, which of these wasn't earned through this transaction? And now you're talking to me about true love? Can your true love magically produce $60 million? Kneeling on the floor beside them, Vivian was sobbing uncontrollably, on the verge of passing out. She crawled to Howard's feet, grabbing his pants leg. "Uncle, don't blame Victor, it's all my fault. I can beg Elaine, we're best friends, she'll definitely forgive me if I beg her. Get the hell out of here." Howard kicked her away and pointed at her nose, cursing loudly. "Who the hell do you think you are? A gold digger who only got into our circle because of Elaine. If it weren't for you, this jinx, would our family have come to this? Best friends? Is this how you treat your friends?" These words were like daggers, stabbing Vivian until her face turned deathly pale, her entire body trembling. Seeing his true love humiliated like this, Victor immediately bristled like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He rushed forward, shielding Vivian behind him, glaring at his father with fury. "Dad! You have no right to speak about Vivian like that. She's innocent. I love her. I was the one who pursued her. If you have any issue, direct it at me." "Fine. Fine. Fine." Howard, overwhelmed with rage, pointed at the two of them. "You claim this is true love, don't you? You think your bond is unbreakable? Then get out of here, together. From today onward, you are no longer my son." The heated argument between father and son ended with Victor and Vivian being driven out of the house. The streets of the affluent neighborhood were silent and empty in the dead of night. The streetlights in the Villa district cast a cold glow, stretching the two figures' disheveled shadows long across the ground. Victor was dressed in an expensive suit, Vivian still wore the pink bridesmaid dress, neither had a single penny on them, and their phones had been smashed by Howard during the argument. The evening breeze blew in, leaving Vivian shivering with cold. Victor took off his suit jacket and draped it over her, still comforting her. "Vivian, don't be afraid. Once my dad calms down, it'll be fine. We truly love each other, he'll understand." Vivian leaned against his chest, but there was no trace of the previous emotion in her eyes, only fear and coldness. For the first time, she truly felt the chill of reality. Turns out, without the aura of Elaine and the title of the young master of Genesis Holdings, Victor was nothing special after all. And her so-called love seemed so ridiculous and powerless in the face of a massive $60 million debt. Early the next morning, I was awakened by a call from my assistant, Lynn. Her voice was frantic and furious. "Elaine, check the trending topics right now. That Vivian is just inhuman." I turned on my phone. Weibo servers were nearly crashing. Hashtag rich heiress forces debt collection at wedding. Hashtag true love is no match for 60 million. Hashtag young master Victor's wrath for love. Hashtag. Several glaring headlines topped the trending list, followed by a deep purple explosive tag. Clicking in, the first post was a lengthy essay Vivian had posted at 3 a.m. The article is written with genuine emotion, exuding the subtle fragrance of tea leaves. It never once mentions the fact that Genesis Holdings owes Empire Capital Group $60 million, nor does it touch upon how she interfered in my relationship with Victor. She portrays herself and Victor as star-crossed lovers who broke free from societal constraints in pursuit of a soul connection. As for me, Elaine, I've been painted as a capital-wrapped princess, a cold-blooded monster who doesn't understand true love and measures everything in terms of money. We don't want to hurt anyone, we just can't suppress the attraction deep in our souls. Love is innocent, it shouldn't be tainted by money and social status. Elaine is my good friend, I understand her pain, but I also beg her not to use cold numbers to strangle a pure relationship. The accompanying image in the article was a photo of her and Victor huddled together on a street corner after being kicked out of the house. The photo was probably taken by a passerby, with an unusual angle and dim lighting that perfectly highlighted their desperate situation and the determination mixed with helplessness in their eyes that said, "Even if the whole world is against us, we'll still be together." There's no denying that Vivian knows exactly how to stir public emotions. The comment section was completely overwhelmed. "Oh my God, so touching. This is true love. That Elaine is downright terrifying, right? Forcing repayment at the wedding? How much does she love money? Feel so bad for Vivian and Victor, these capitalists are utterly disgusting. Supporting you. True love conquers all. That rich princess is just jealous." Countless do-gooders and keyboard warriors flooded the comment section, launching a relentless barrage of verbal attacks against me. What's even more ridiculous is that Victor somehow got hold of a phone, reposted this lengthy article, and passionately commented, "I will spend my entire life protecting Vivian and fighting against this cold world." This can be considered a textbook example of adding fuel to the fire. My phone was instantly bombarded with countless calls from unknown numbers, along with a flood of abusive messages filled with vile content. Assistant Lynn was so angry on the other end of the phone that she stomped her feet. "Elaine, this is a complete distortion of the truth. How can they be so shameless? Should we issue a statement immediately to clarify? Let's throw out the contract showing Genesis Holdings debt." I scroll through the screen, reading those vicious curses, but my face remains expressionless. I calmly put down my phone, pick up my coffee, take a sip, and give a faint smile. Don't rush. Let her fly a little longer. Haven't you heard? When a bubble is blown to its largest size, the slightest poke will make it go pop and shatter completely. The higher you fly, the harder you fall. Lynn seemed momentarily stunned by my voice, which was calm to the point of being icy. I looked out the window. The frenzy of public opinion was like a fleeting firework, dazzling yet painfully short-lived. Vivian thought that by controlling public opinion, she could morally blackmail me into submission. She was too naive. She believed this was an emotional dispute, but for me, from beginning to end, it has always been a commercial war. Just then, my phone vibrated. A text message from an unfamiliar number popped up. The content is very short, just one sentence. Genesis Holdings is urgently transferring assets through several offshore shell companies. Be careful. I stared at the unfamiliar number, lost in thought. The location of this number is overseas. Who is the sender? Why would they remind me at such a time? A vague figure flashed through my mind. Could it be him? 4 p.m. Only 1 hour left before the deadline I set. In my office, the silence was so profound that I could hear the ticking of the wall clock secondhand. The legal team was already on standby, with all the litigation materials laid out on the table, just waiting for my command. The sharp ring of my phone pierced the air. It was Howard's number. I hit the speakerphone button. What came through the receiver was no longer yesterday's feigned composure, but the broken sobs of someone utterly shattered. Elaine. 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 I'm begging you. Please give us a way out. 6 million. I really can't come up with that much. Please, be merciful and give us a few more days. No, a month. I swear I'll pay it back within a month. His voice was filled with desperate pleading. I leaned back in my chair, my tone utterly flat. Uncle, I gave you a chance yesterday. Initially, it was just about the money, but since you all wanted to escalate things and turn family matters into a scandal known to the entire internet, I have no choice but to play along to the end. Now the whole internet is calling me heartless and cruel for using money to pressure people. If I don't act even more ruthless, wouldn't I be doing an injustice to this reputation? Howard on the other end of the line gasped, seemingly taken aback by my words. He probably still thought I was the obedient Empire Capital Group goddaughter who could be easily controlled for the greater good. Elaine, you can't do this. Our families have had such a long-standing relationship. Relationship? I let out a cold laugh. From the moment your son announced in front of the whole city's elite that he was in love with my best friend, all that remains between us is an account to settle. I didn't give him another chance to speak and directly told my chief lawyer beside me, Attorney Lee, let's begin. Lawyer Lee nodded and picked up the phone. I spoke into the phone, enunciating each word clearly as I declared my decision. Mr. Howard, considering that Genesis Holdings has not only shown no intention of repaying the debt but has also attempted to pressure us through online public opinion, along with the significant risk of maliciously transferring assets to evade obligations, we have just filed an emergency application for property preservation with the court 10 minutes ago. What? A startled exclamation came from the other end of the phone. At this very moment while we are speaking, the court's ruling should have already been issued. Genesis Holdings corporate accounts, as well as all personal accounts, properties, and vehicles under your name and your son Victor's name, will be frozen until the conclusion of the case. You. Howard's voice trembled uncontrollably, ultimately leaving only a series of heavy breaths, followed by a loud thud. It seemed his phone had fallen to the ground. I hung up the phone. Almost simultaneously, the online narrative began to subtly shift. The first to react were some financial bloggers. Holy crap! Huge scoop. Empire Capital Group has applied for asset preservation, and the court has already approved it. This means the court has preliminarily determined that Genesis Holdings poses a risk of asset transfer. I always said there was more to this story. Romance aside, refusing to repay debts while transferring assets, that's a whole different ball game. Isn't this just plain debt evasion? Vivian's little essay accused others of being cold-hearted, yet her own boyfriend's family was secretly doing such things behind the scenes? LOL, they asked for evidence and got exactly what they deserved. Netizens who had been cheering for true love were instantly dumbfounded, as the comments section flooded with doubts and backlash. Under Vivian's post, the tone suddenly shifted dramatically. So they refused to pay back the money and then played the victim card? Transferring assets? So this lady's true love is actually a deadbeat? Impressive. I watched all this unfold without a ripple in my heart. This was just the first step. The office door was knocked. Come in. The door was pushed open, and in walked a tall, imposing man with an extraordinary presence. Dressed in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, his chiseled features and piercing gaze exuded an air of formidable authority, as if he was always in control. I recognized him. Yesterday at the wedding, he had occupied the most conspicuous seat in the front row, one of the few who didn't show shock when Victor announced he was backing out. Instead, a knowing smirk had played on his lips. Vincent. A rising capital tycoon and a legend in the investment banking circle. He walked up to my desk and handed me a business card, minimalist in design yet exuding exceptional quality. Elaine, let me introduce myself, I'm Vincent. His voice was deep and magnetic, perfectly matching his own aura. I looked at him, already knowing the answer in my heart. That text message, did you send it? He didn't deny it, merely curling the corner of his lips into a meaningful smile. Just a small favor. Genesis Holdings diverted a payment that should have been made to our company to cover the deficits on another one of their projects. In a way, I'm also one of the creditors. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, his movements composed and elegant. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Elaine, don't you agree? I understood. So that's how it was. How does Vincent want to cooperate? I cut straight to the point. A flash of admiration crossed Vincent's eyes. It's simple. I can provide you with complete evidence chains of all financial misconduct and tax evasion by Genesis Holdings, helping you take them down completely and ensuring they never recover. He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes gleaming with a hunter's intensity. And what I want is that piece of land in the east they're holding. Deal. I answered without hesitation. Vincent's arrival acted like a potent catalyst, instantly accelerating my meticulously planned revenge scheme onto the fast track. He looked at my resolute demeanor, the smile on his lips deepening. Elaine, working with someone like you is truly a pleasure. We exchanged a knowing smile. An intricate net targeting Genesis Holdings was officially set into motion at that very moment. I chose not to fight this battle of public opinion with a cold legal letter. To deal with someone like Vivian, who excels at emotional manipulation, the best approach is to use her own tactics to completely destroy her. That night, as if by prior agreement, major gossip forums and influencer accounts began anonymously posting exposés. The first wave of revelations was the complete 6-month chat history between Vivian and Victor, which I obtained through special channels. Victor, are you really happy with Elaine? Every time I see you forcing a smile when you're with her, my heart aches. Don't worry about me, I'll be fine. As long as you're happy, even if I have to watch you marry someone else, I'm content with that. Victor, you have to be brave and go after what you truly want. I believe Sister Elaine is so kind, she'll definitely understand and support our relationship. Harrison dotes on her so much, he might even help us. Every word is subtly guiding Victor toward the cliff of reckless devotion for love, while insidiously implying that Empire Capital Group would foot the bill for their true love. The online sentiment completely shifted the moment the chat logs were revealed. Holy shit! The green tea vibes are practically oozing through the screen. Step by step coaxing someone to break off an engagement and still expecting their family to pay up. What a top-tier gold digger. I must have been blind to ever feel sorry for her before. This is no innocent little flower, it's a straight-up man-eating plant. Next came the second wave of revelations. This batch came from some of my friends during college who had long been disgusted by Vivian's behavior. During her university years, Vivian exploited my reputation as her best friend to borrow money for luxury items to embellish her image. She simultaneously dated multiple boyfriends, each carefully selected for their affluent family backgrounds or resources that could benefit her. There was even evidence of her secretly forging my signature behind my back to apply for high-limit credit cards. Hashtag the Rizio for scheming best friend hashtag. Hashtag real-life farmer and snake hashtag. The new entry quickly replaced the old one, climbing to the top of the trending list. If the first two waves of revelations only caused Vivian's public persona to crumble, then the third wave, provided by Vincent, was the fatal blow. Through his channels, Vincent obtained concrete evidence proving that during her internship at Genesis Holdings, Vivian leaked the core data of bidding documents for commercial projects involving Empire Capital Group to Genesis Holdings competitors, in exchange for a designer bag and a European vacation. One such leak directly resulted in my company losing nearly $10 million in potential profits. This news, like a bomb detonating, not only exploded across the internet but also completely woke me up. Turns out, she had already betrayed me long ago. While I still saw her as a good friend who needed my protection and financial support, she had already stabbed me in the back. Victor wasn't even her ultimate target. He was nothing but a foolish yet handy tool for her to leverage towards greater ambitions. Vivian's social media accounts were completely overrun by furious netizens. Insults, curses, and all sorts of vile language surged toward her like a tidal wave. She completely broke down. I was in a video conference with Vincent discussing the details of acquiring Genesis Holdings assets when the phone rang. I answered it and put it on speaker. Vivian's shrill voice pierced through from the other end. Elaine. Why would you do this to me? Why would you ruin me? Weren't we best friends? I could almost picture her hysterical state at that moment. I picked up my coffee, blew on the steam, and spoke as casually as if discussing the weather. I'm just laying out everything you've done, one by one, for everyone to see. A true friend wouldn't steal from me, wouldn't steal my fiancé, and certainly wouldn't climb up by stepping on my corpse. My voice was soft, yet carried a chilling force that made her shudder. Every single thing you've done is selling out our friendship with a price tag. Vivian, everything you've got now is exactly what you deserve. The line fell silent for a few seconds before Victor's furious voice erupted. Vivian. What the hell happened with the leaked tender documents? How many more fucking things are you hiding from me? The sound of objects being smashed followed, accompanied by their heart-wrenching screams and sobs. Their so-called true love alliance proved utterly fragile when exposed to the brutal realities of self-interest. I hung up the phone. There was no imagined satisfaction, nor the joy of revenge. All that remained was a calm sense of closure and a final farewell to that once cherished, false friendship. It was like performing surgery, removing a long-dead tissue. The process was painful, but from now on, I won't be infected by it anymore. The stock price of Genesis Holdings, under the impact of a series of negative news, unsurprisingly crashed. 3 consecutive limit downs wiped out the majority of its market value, leaving it just one step away from delisting. Collection calls from banks, payment demand letters from suppliers, and legal notices from other creditors snowed down on Genesis Holdings like a blizzard. Overwhelmed by this string of blows, Howard suffered a sudden cerebral hemorrhage and was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. Victor's world was turned upside down overnight. With his father hospitalized and the company on the brink of bankruptcy, the once illustrious young master of Genesis Holdings had now become a rat everyone wanted to chase away. His so-called soulmate, Vivian, after squeezing the last bit of usefulness out of him, vanished without a trace, taking with her the little remaining cash he had. For the first time, he experienced the bitter taste of betrayal and utter desperation. That afternoon, the sky grew gloomy, and a torrential downpour began to fall. I had just finished a meeting and was walking downstairs to the company lobby when I saw a figure that was both familiar and unfamiliar. Victor. He wasn't holding an umbrella, standing rigidly in the rain, completely drenched, his messy hair clinging to his forehead. He looked like a stray dog abandoned by its owner. When he saw me come out, his eyes lit up as if grasping at the last lifeline. He staggered toward me. Then, under the stunned gazes of all the office workers coming in and out of the building, he dropped to his knees with a thud. Rain trickled down his cheeks, indistinguishable whether it was rain or tears. Elaine. I was wrong. I was truly wrong. He wept, his voice hoarse, clutching at the hem of my suit pants without a shred of dignity. I shouldn't have been so foolish, shouldn't have listened to that bitch Vivian. I still love you, I've always loved only you. Being with her was just a moment of foolishness, a fleeting novelty. Give me another chance, let's go back to how things were, okay? Get Harrison to spare our family, please? He begged pathetically, trying to move me with the old feelings he had already trampled into dust with his own hands. I looked down at him imperiously. At this man who had once been so full of himself before me, now kneeling at my feet like a dog. In my heart, there is no pity, only a chilling indifference. "Victor," I began, my voice cutting through the rain with unusual clarity, "do you know what your biggest flaw is?" He looked up blankly. "You're weak, vain, and foolish, yet you always try to disguise your selfishness with noble excuses like pursuing true love. You never, not once, have been willing to take responsibility for your choices. From the moment you publicly broke off our engagement for Vivian's sake, it was completely over between us. When you conspired with her to attack me with public opinion, whatever little affection remained between us was severed entirely." I forcefully pulled the hem of my pants free from his grasp and took a step back to distance myself from him. "As for Genesis Holdings, business is like war. No regrets once the move is made. This is the path you chose. Kneeling here begging me is useless." I walked past him without looking back. A black Bentley was parked by the roadside, its door opening as Vincent stepped out holding a black umbrella. He said nothing, silently shielding me from the rain overhead before opening the car door and handing me a soft, dry towel. I got into the warm, dry car and watched through the rising window as Victor knelt in the pouring rain, letting out desperate, animalistic howls. My heart remained utterly unmoved. All the humiliation he had once inflicted on me had now been repaid in full. We were even. The car's heater was on, blocking out the storm outside. Vincent handed me a cup of hot coffee. He didn't ask about Victor, just quietly kept me company. The car glided smoothly through the rain, the atmosphere somewhat silent. After a long while, Vincent finally spoke, his voice tinged with inquiry, "You don't seem the least bit surprised, from start to finish." His observational skills were always this sharp. Holding the warm coffee cup in my hands, I gazed at the rainy scene outside the window and suddenly smiled. Because 1 week before the wedding, I received photos of the two of them entering and leaving a hotel together. Vincent's eyebrows raised slightly. "I hired a private investigator to look into it," I admitted frankly, meeting his gaze. At that time, Vivian excitedly gifted me a Mont Blanc pen, saying it was a present she had saved several months' salary to buy for me. She said, "Elaine, you always have to sign so many documents. Using a good pen will make your wrist feel better." I was deeply touched at the time. But soon after, in Victor's study, I saw another identical pen, the exact same one, placed in his most frequently used pen holder. A matching pair. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I quietly hired the most reliable private investigator under my name. The results, unsurprisingly, confirmed my suspicions. There were unspeakably vulgar photos, detailed hotel check-in records, and even the mockery and schemes they exchanged about me while they were together. "A woman's intuition can sometimes be more accurate than financial statements," I said to Vincent, my tone laced with self-deprecation. He looked at me, his eyes revealing a complex mix of emotions. I continued, "Truth be told, I gave Victor one final chance. I told myself that if he stood at the altar and said I do in front of everyone, I would treat those 60 million as my personal additional dowry to help Genesis Holdings survive this crisis. Then, I would quietly make Vivian, this lurking threat, disappear completely from our lives in my own way. I've even prepared the business plan for Plan B, detailing how to restructure Genesis Holdings and bring it back to life. This might be my final act of kindness toward him, and toward this marriage we were about to begin. But he chose the dumbest path, one that also saves me the most trouble," I concluded calmly. A long silence settled over the car. Vincent looked at me, his gaze shifting from curiosity to full appreciation and heartache. "So, everything that happened at the wedding was part of your plan?" he asked. "Not entirely," I shook my head, meeting his eyes, a genuine and confident smile curving my lips. "I'm just accustomed to preparing both Plan A and Plan B for everything. It was Victor's choice that determined which plan I would implement. Every clause, every detail in that 60 million yuan loan contract was drafted word by the best commercial legal team my father could hire in the country. Specifically, to prevent exactly this kind of situation from happening today. Vincent burst into genuine laughter. Leaning back in his chair, he let out a low, delighted chuckle. Elaine, he called my name, you're far more impressive than I imagined. I am honored to be your ally. His gaze was scorching and sincere, showing his admiration for me without reservation. At that moment, I felt as if all those unbearable people and things from the past had truly drifted away from me. This man before me didn't see a pitiful creature jilted at the altar, nor a scheming queen of vengeance. What he saw was someone just like him, calm, decisive, and relishing the thrill of the game in the business world, a kindred spirit. The feeling of being understood and recognized brought me a long-lost sense of joy. Thank you. I smiled in return. The honor is mine. I had still underestimated human desperation. When someone is pushed to the brink, having lost everything, she becomes capable of anything. Vivian reappeared after disappearing for several days. She realized she had been deceived by Victor. The lavish cars, the mansion, and the bright future Victor promised her were nothing but empty checks that could never be cashed. As for herself, due to her notorious reputation, she was expelled from all the circles she had fought so hard to enter. She couldn't find a job, and even renting an apartment became impossible because she was too well known. To make matters worse, the high-interest loans she had taken out to package her image had snowballed into an astronomical figure through compounded interest. Debt collectors came pounding at her door, covering the entrance of her shabby rented apartment with graffiti-like demands, "Pay what you owe." She completely lost her mind. She found Victor, who was also struggling in despair. Elaine. It's all Elaine's fault that we're in this mess. We can't just let this go. Her eyes were bloodshot, her expression frenzied. Her father is so rich, 100 million would be just a drop in the bucket for him. If we get that money, we can go abroad and start over. Victor was swayed by her words. Two desperate individuals, finding common ground in their plight, devised what they believed was a flawless kidnapping plan. They chose to make their move in the underground parking lot. That day after work, I had just reached my parking space when two dark figures suddenly darted out from behind a nearby pillar. It was Victor and Vivian. Victor was holding a fruit knife, its tip pointed at me, but his grip trembled like a falling leaf in the autumn wind. Vivian hid behind him, blustering with a shrill scream, "Elaine! Stay back! And don't scream! Or we won't be kind to you." I looked at these two lunatics before me, feeling no fear. If anything, it was almost laughable. Was this their final act of desperation? A pathetic farce of a kidnapping? I observed them calmly, even finding the leisure to remark, "Victor, you can't even hold a knife steady, and you're attempting a kidnapping?" Victor was provoked by me and shouted emotionally, "Shut up. This is all your fault. You've destroyed everything we had." I destroyed everything for you? It was as if I had heard the biggest joke of all. What destroyed you was your own greed and stupidity. I couldn't even be bothered to argue with them anymore. Before I could even speak, let alone make a gesture for help. Suddenly, from a few inconspicuous corners in the garage, 4 or 5 black-clad bodyguards charged out instantly. With swift and well-trained movements, in less than 10 seconds, they had already pinned Victor and Vivian, who hadn't even reacted yet, firmly to the ground. The fruit knife in Victor's hand fell to the floor with a loud clang and rolled far away. Vivian's scream turned into a terrified wail. That Vincent guy, he really can predict everything. After the wedding, he warned me that a cornered dog would jump over the wall, and told me to tighten security. Who would have thought it would actually come in handy? The security team my father arranged had been secretly protecting me all along. Victor and Vivian were pinned firmly to the cold cement floor by 2 bodyguards, resembling pitiful yet ridiculous insects, completely unable to move. Soon, the police, alerted by the call, arrived at the scene. The flashing police lights cast a glow on their pale, despairing faces. Their final act of madness turned into an absolute farce, marking the end of their lives with unparalleled disgrace. Genesis Holdings has completely collapsed. Victor and Vivian were sentenced according to law for attempted kidnapping and extortion, with irrefutable evidence. Howard, who was lying in the hospital, received this news and suffered a devastating blow to his already half-paralyzed body, leading to a complete stroke that left him barely able to speak. Genesis Holdings officially announced bankruptcy liquidation. An auction targeting the core assets of Genesis Holdings was held quietly and swiftly. Vincent and I emerged as the biggest winners of this grand feast. Through our joint operation, those once coveted assets of Genesis Holdings were dismantled and auctioned off one by one. Using part of the $60 million I recovered, along with the backing from Empire Capital Group, I successfully acquired Genesis Holdings' headquarters building and several of its most profitable premium businesses at an extremely low price. Vincent also got what he desired, securing that prime piece of land in the Eastern District he had long coveted. We had a pleasant cooperation and shared the spoils evenly. A month later, I founded a new investment company, Nianjiang Capital. The company's address was set up in the former headquarters building of Genesis Holdings. On the day of the ribbon cutting, the sunlight was perfect. I was dressed in a sharp white suit, standing on what was once the territory of Genesis Holdings, cutting the red ribbon. My father stood beside me, his gaze filled with gratification and pride. "Elaine, you've grown up," he patted my back. "You're more composed and tougher than I ever imagined. You've surpassed your father." I smiled, and it was the most genuine smile I'd had in a long while. "It's all thanks to your guidance." That night, I stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling window of what used to be Howard's office. Now it was my office. I gazed down at the city lights below, watching the endless flow of traffic, feeling a vast openness in my heart. This place no longer belonged to Genesis Holdings. From today onward, this was Elaine's domain. A storm that began with betrayal and humiliation ultimately became the firmest stepping stone for the takeoff of my career. Ironic, yet utterly realistic. The phone rang. It was a congratulatory message from Vincent. "Congratulations, Elaine, on your housewarming." I replied, "Thank you, Vincent." "Congratulations to you too." He quickly responded, "To celebrate our win-win situation, how about I treat you to dinner tomorrow?" I looked at the screen, my fingers tapping out a word on the keyboard. Okay. Life returned to its normal track, even busier and more fulfilling than before. The first project of Nianjiang Capital was a great success, making me instantly famous in the industry. One afternoon, a highly capable project manager at my company suddenly developed acute appendicitis. After finishing my work, I drove to the hospital to visit them. The hospital corridors were always filled with the scent of disinfectant, mingled with the oppressive air of life, aging, sickness, and death. After inquiring at the nurse's station, I was just about to head to the ward when, at a corner, I unexpectedly spotted a familiar figure. It's Victor's mother. She looked at least 10 years older than when I last saw her at the wedding. More than half of her hair had turned white, and her face was covered with sorrowful wrinkles. The elegance and grace she once possessed were completely gone. She was pushing a wheelchair, on which sat a man with a crooked face, slurred speech, and drool dripping from the corner of his mouth. "Howard." Our eyes met. Victor's mother froze for a moment, then an intense hatred erupted in her eyes. She let go of the wheelchair and rushed toward me like a madwoman, raising her hand as if to hit me. "You cursed woman. You poisonous wretch. You've ruined our family. Give me back my son. Give me back my husband." She shrieked, her voice piercing and grating. I didn't even move. The bodyguard behind me stepped forward instantly, easily seizing her wrist and keeping her a meter away from me. She couldn't hit me, nor could she break free, so she thudded to her knees, beginning to wail, cursing and begging me all at once. "Elaine. I'm begging you. Please let Victor go. He's still young. He can't spend his whole life in prison. You've already ruined him and torn our family apart. What more do you want? Are you really going to destroy his entire life before you're satisfied?" Her sobs drew the attention of other patients and their families in the hallway. I looked at her kneeling on the ground throwing a tantrum, then glanced at the expressionless, unresponsive Howard in the wheelchair, feeling neither hatred nor pity in my heart. It was like watching two complete strangers who had nothing to do with me. I spoke calmly, my voice soft yet clear enough for everyone around to hear. Auntie, I'm not the one who caused this situation today. It was your own choice. It was your greed, Victor's stupidity, Vivian's malice, and your unconditional indulgence toward your son. The law will deliver the fairest verdict. He broke the law, so he must face the consequences. Pleading with me is pointless. With that, I turned away without another glance and walked off. Behind me, Victor's mother's wailing and cursing continued, but I could no longer hear it. Their world, their joys and sorrows, had nothing to do with me anymore. I couldn't even muster the energy to spare them any emotional response. Perhaps this is the highest form of contempt, the most complete letting go. 1 year later. Nianjiang Capital has rapidly gained prominence in the industry, with several investment projects I spearheaded achieving astonishing returns. I am no longer just the heir of Empire Capital Group, but a rising star widely recognized in the business world, Elaine, a female entrepreneur with both tact and vision. On this day, I was invited to speak as a representative of young entrepreneurs at a top-tier industry summit held in Shanghai. Dressed in a well-tailored white suit, my long hair elegantly tied up, I stood confidently and composedly under the spotlight. I shared my investment philosophy, discussing risk control and the insights into human nature in commercial games. Finally, I said, in the business world, you must always prepare a plan B for yourself. Because you never know if your partners might choose the most foolish path at the most critical moment. The audience responded with knowing laughter and thunderous applause. My gaze swept across the room, and in the first row center seat, I immediately spotted Vincent. He was also wearing a suit, without a tie, the collar slightly open, appearing more casual than usual. He was looking at me, his deep eyes filled with unconcealed amusement and strong admiration. Our gazes met in the air, as if transcending time and space. At the post-summit cocktail party, he carried 2 glasses of champagne through the crowd and walked over to me. Elaine, today's speech was brilliant. I took the wine glass, lightly clinked it with his, and smiled, saying, Vincent, you flatter me too much. He shook his head, looked into my eyes, and his expression suddenly turned very serious. I'm not praising you as a business partner, his voice was low, carrying a bewitching power, but as a man admiring an utterly radiant and exceptional woman. My heart skipped a beat at that moment. Throughout this year, we've worked together seamlessly, having shared meals privately several times and conversed harmoniously. I always thought we were allies, kindred spirits. Never would I have imagined. He looked at me, the smile in his eyes deepening as he slowly extended his hand toward me. Elaine, we've already fought side by side once. Would you be interested in making this side by side a regular thing? Under the light, his palm was broad, his knuckles distinct, full of strength. I looked into his sincere and fervent eyes, which held admiration, respect, and, more importantly, the equal love I had been longing for. I laughed. Then, I reached out and grasped his hand. All right.